Are we on?
I don't know.
We're on.
Am I on? Am I on? Yeah.
Yes, you're on.
Okay.
Hi, Kevin.
Hi, Ophira.
Hey, everybody. This is our author. Give him a huge round of applause. It's Kevin Morris.
Is that the camera's there?
Just out of curiosity, I know you're from Philadelphia. Did you ever live in New York?
Yes, I went to law school here.
You went to law school here?
I went to law school here, right near here. I went to NYU.
You went to NYU? And how do you think back of your time in New York as fond? Or when you're here in late January, you're like, wow, I made an excellent choice by leaving?
No, I look back at it very fondly. I come back a lot, and I have a place here now. I think of it as home. I think of it more as home than LA, even though I've been there for 25 years.
Really?
Yeah. I love this. Love the city. I'm an East Coast guy.
What's one thing that you always do when you come back here? Do you have a haunt or a place?
Well, you know, my habits have changed a little bit, but I kind of lived at the Kettle of Fish when I was in law school.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's a whole other story, and it's relocated. They didn't tell me where they moved it to, so.
Tradition over.
Yeah.
So I'll be honest, I read a lot of memoirs, and when I was given a copy of your book called White Man's Problems, and knowing that you are a successful entertainment lawyer living in LA, my first thought was it was a memoir. And I was pleasantly surprised. Not that I wouldn't want to read that memoir, but I was like, oh, I'm actually reading this literary short story fiction, and it was just not what I expected. And so here you are. You went to NYU to study law, but are you a lawyer that is now a writer, or were you always a writer that took a little off the beaten path journey into law?
Excellent question. I like to think of myself as the latter. I think at heart, I have always felt like a writer. You know, but after college, I was thinking about tonight. One of the things I was thinking about is how much more acceptable it seems, even 25 years later, when you make a career decision to pursue something artistic. People today want to be filmmakers and artists, and there's just sort of a acceptability or acceptance, and popularity, and everybody's sort of okay with pursuing fields of self-expression. It wasn't really that the case when I got out of college. It was almost, or maybe it was my trip, I don't know, but I just maybe I didn't have the courage either, but I kind of associated not going to law school with being irresponsible, and so I headed to law school, and I hated it.
You did hate it? But somehow you turned that hate into a pretty nice little law career.
That's what we try to do. Trying to turn hate around. Yeah, I mean, I hated being a lawyer, and there are legions of great examples of lawyers who are fantastic writers who adored practicing law. I am not one of them, especially sort of the traditional practice of law. So I kind of fumbled around, and I went out to LA because I didn't want to work in New York because it was sort of yellow tie Reagan era, Wall Street, you remember that. And I didn't want to do that. I knew enough that I didn't want to do that. I headed out to LA, with sort of some vague notion of being in the entertainment business, even though I didn't know how to do it. And I worked at a couple, sort of real businessy firms, kind of flunked out of them. And I think I'm mostly a creative person. I mean, I think there's like truly completely creative people, and there's truly non-creative people, and there's a spectrum, but I think most of us fall somewhere between the poles, and I think a hell of a lot of us fall in like a straddle between the two, and I always felt like I felt more on the creative side of that straddle, and what I was really lucky enough to do was be able to fashion a career in the law where I got involved in representing talented people. Right.
So you're dealing with a lot of art around you. Now, when you were in high school or college, even though you were studying something different, were you writing? Were you writing short stories or poetry or?
Yeah, I've always written in one way or another, and always received a lot of positive feedback from my mom or my aunts.
We have different mothers.
So, I had, even with whatever circumstances were going on, writing was an outlet, my father worked at it, I told some people this the other day. I just remember this. My father worked at an oil refinery, and a guy jumped in a smokestack and killed himself. And my dad came home and told the story, and the guy left 3 quarters and 2 dimes pointing in an arrow towards the smokestack that he was going to jump in. I wrote that as a short story.
Yeah.
And I remember, my mom reminded me of that. I did that when I was 11. So I was always writing, and and took a lot of writing courses in college, and have been probably everybody, a very, very avid reader, and escape through fiction, and sort of pursued that all my life. But as my career took off, or as my legal practice took up more and more of my time, I wrote less.
Right, of course, because it takes a lot of work and time to be able to write a book.
Yes.
Let's talk about a few things. First of all, how did you come up with the name White Man's Problems? So,
it is not a political statement, that's for sure. It is no polemic. I got nothing to prove. I'm not here to, it's not my goal in life to vocalize the poor status of white men in society. I actually, when I could no longer face the fact that I wasn't writing fiction, I got a place, a separate office, where I mandated that I would go 3 days a week and just stare at the blank screen if I had to. And so I started writing some stuff, and the sort of rejection process with the publishing industry began. And it was actually one of the pieces of feedback I got at some point, and it was perfectly well-intentioned person, but one of the pieces of feedback I got was look, these are just white man's problems. And so,
You're thank you.
Well, no, I felt sorry for myself for about a month, and dealt with the rejection, and how terrible is that? And then I just went, that's it. That's right. That's right. That's what it is. That's what they are. And that was cool. That was key. But I mean, the point is, it was the feedback I got. I didn't, I sort of used that feedback, and then I started contemplating that colloquialism, that statement, and thinking about it and playing around with it. And I actually it kind of just grew with me that it was a good angle and a good title, a good angle, a good way in, and a lot of things I wanted to try to express.
And I have to say, that's why I was like, oh wow, I haven't read short stories in a long time. I was so pleasantly surprised to be able to do that. And obviously, you're dealing with a lot of this is from the main characters are men, is often from their point of view. Some of it's first person, some of it is through characters, and they're all grappling with their success or their the woes and angst of the contemporary world that they live in. And it's fiction, but there's a couple stories that involve lawyers. How much of it are you taking little dribbles from your life and infusing it into this fiction?
Well, I think it's pretty hard to write without writing what a little bit. But it was more that I wanted to. It's more that what came out, when I started writing. I've been a lifetime reader, I wanted to cross that divide, and I wrote some nonfiction pieces and some opinion pieces and some businessy pieces over the years, and I had op-eds published, but really crossing into the place of fiction, what I found is, to say, okay, I'm not just a reader anymore. I'm throwing the books away. I'm not listening to anybody else's voice. I'm going to have to read myself. One of the things that blocked me for years is that I thought I was just sort of engaging in mimicry, and just copying other great writers that I loved. And I finally kind of got desperate enough to throw that fear away and say, fuck it. I'm going to invite those influences into the room with me. And I think influence is a big question in literature, and people talk about it all the time.
Sure.
And I just decided to embrace it and a lot of this book and a lot of what I write actually has to do with that a lot, because a lot of just sort of my formative stuff and stuff that's influenced me in my life and that I think about all the time and has engaged me intellectually has been the writing that I loved in my youth. So, I guess what I was getting at was when you finally do, and you probably experienced it, but when you finally do sort of face the page, you get desperate, it's just like you turn from being sort of contemplative to like, and you got to scrap, it's like it's over all that, like nobody's watching, and you got to like find something to hang on to, and and you start grabbing books, and instead of reading how beautiful they are, it's like, how did she do this? How did he do this?
Right.
How did that? Oh, he doesn't say, he says comma which, not comma that, stuff. You really, and you just sort of get scratchy, and then I think it's a matter of calming down. But
I would do searches through my documents, and I was like, I think I used the word very too much, and that would just be 9 hours of my life just searching. Like, well, that was good. It was really some major exciting writing that just happened there.
So once I came up with the title, to get back to try to answer your question, once I came up with the title, then I kind of try to sort of groove with the idea of, then I wanted to, I love 9 stories by J.D. Salinger, so I thought I would write 9 stories, and then I kind of thought, all right, let's write 9 stories about 9 white guys in the different stages of the life cycle, and put them all across the matrix of socioeconomic conditions, and and give them all kinds of problems. And I think the colloquialism, white man's problems, has risen from comedy, and it's risen from Louis C.K. did something, and Saturday Night Live did something, and it's a funny thing, right? It's like, and it connotes like frivolous problems, and that's hilarious, that's great, and that's true, and it's it's a funny thing to talk about. But then it's an interesting sort of, I don't know, metaphor, colloquialism to play around with, and and it's a agnostic statement. It's just a white man's problems, and let the reader decide how to navigate what are and what are not important problems, and pluck stuff from my real life, and pluck events from places I've pluck experiences from places I've been, and not be afraid to write about kids or old men, poor people or rich people, like everybody can decide what they want, but not to be afraid about writing about the 1% or somebody that's stupid rich, like write about them too.
Well, I mean, it is somewhat satisfying to read also fiction that's talking about someone with great success and their downfall. That everyone of course has their own problems that never get changed, and a lot of the stories don't have huge resolve, which is what I like. They're very subtle in the way someone is grappling. You have a main character. Well, with the title story, which is the final story in the book, White Man's Problems, is the story of a man who begrudgingly goes on his 5th grade school trip to Virginia, and he's out of sorts and just misbehaves terribly while trying to be responsible and figure out his place. And there's a very subtle redemption in it.
Hope so. Well, maybe. Hope so.
Yeah.
You took that good. That's good.
What's that?
You think it was redemptive? You think he was redeemed?
I think he thought he was redeemed. Which is all that matters when you're reading it from his point of view. I think he lived to see another day, that he was like, Is that was that the first story that you wrote for this collection?
No, it was actually the last. It was the last. And I thought, well, one of the things I thought is not to go out. I love John Updike. John Updike is one of my heroes, and he died, I think, between when I started this, and I think about Updike a lot, and he's just a giant artist. And one of the things he would do is he was one of the things I loved about. I mean, he would interweave his own life all the time, dangerously so, into things, and he also would. But he was courageous enough to make his lead characters bad guys often, and he also, he had a character named Jeff Fanshawe. My stuff is very. I try to play around with my influences a lot, like inner. It's kind of a pretentious word, but intertextual. Like I try to refer to some of the stuff that I that I love and try to make little references to it and hide. You know, there's a waiter named O'Hara. That's all the John O'Hara story, stuff like that. Just have like sort of fun, play sort of fun games with influences, stuff like
Easter
that.
eggs.
Easter eggs, exactly.
Yeah.
You know, so Hanshaw. So up that had a guy named Jeff Fanshawe who was you know, like an alter ego, but he was like a dick, and and so I thought like, wow, what if I read a story about, why not, instead of having this sort of triumphant guy riding out into the sunset to end the thing, how fun would it be to write a sort of jackass? And then the idea was put him in a, you know, he's a chaperone for a bunch of fifth graders, so it's the ultimate kind of, you know, position of responsibility.
And the innocence too, right? Which is,
and he's irresponsible, and it's also set against. He goes to D.C., you know, so it's set against seeing all the great monuments and all our monuments to really august, you know, fantastic figures, and I think that actually is a contemporary problem, right? You know, with the alienation of men with war and stuff like that, and great events, and you know, we're sort of all watching our iPads and stuff,
right? Like where's the heroism, or like yeah,
exactly. So I don't know, that's how that one came about.
Do you want to give us a little taste?
Sure. I don't know how can I read with my microphone. This will be interesting. So this is just a fun little. Hopefully fun.
You can. Do you want to put it there and stand up and read there?
Can I?
You can do it. Yeah, sure. I can hold it, but that would be really weird.
That would be. How about this? Can you hear me?
One of these, rock star.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep.
The podium.
Okay. All right. Does it work? Does it work? Does the podium work? Whoa. So, does it work? No?
Put your hand right here. Take this one.
What's that? Hello?
Put that one.
1, 2. Okay. All right. So he's on the Doug Hansall is on the field trip, and they've stopped at the first Marriott, and they've put the kids to bed, and of course he's supposed to stay in bed with his kid, or they're supposed to share a room, but he lets his kid jump in with 2 other kids so he can have the room to himself. The boys were told to brush their teeth and get to sleep, and Hansall's divorced, and he's going through a divorce. The boys were told to brush their teeth and get to sleep, but Hansall knew, and they knew, that his instructions were toothless business. Hansall didn't care. He had discharged his duty. Let them have some fun. The teachers would come down on them when need be. He went to his room. His cell phone rang as he walked over the threshold. It was Joanna. "How is he?" she said. "He's fine. He's asleep." "How are Dana and Marjorie?" "Who are Dana and Marjorie?" "The teachers. Marjorie is the older one. Dana is the one you'll be hitting on." "They're fine." "Do they all know you lied about the New York trip so you didn't have to ride in coach?" "As a matter of fact, I think they do. I think they hate me. I think they all hate me, so you'll be happy." She exhaled. "I told you, don't fuck this up. I never should have let this happen." Let's not do this," he said. "No one is fooled," she said, "just so you know. Everyone knows what you're doing. Can I go now?" "Make sure he calls me in the morning." 15 minutes later, Hansall was in bed. The room quality was beneath his low expectations. No minibar, no nothing. The only extravagance was a small coffee maker and the accoutrements for a 1-cup morning pop, complete with a spongy to-go cup and powdered dairy packets. Thankfully, the Marriott's no-frills attitude did not extend to the world of pay-per-view movies. With a product loyalty he could never muster in the supermarket when trying to pick a medium hot salsa or organic oatmeal, Hansall scrolled past the still in theaters and best of TV and went right to adults only. He thought about driving Miss Daisy crazy, but changed his mind and selected amateur screen test. The TV displayed a ticking clock with the caption, "1 moment please, your selection is starting." But after 3 minutes, Hansel realized it wasn't clicking over. He went to the main menu and began the process again. This time, the ticking clock remained on digital hold, promising him what he wanted, but not actually giving it to him. He called the front desk. "I can't get a movie," he said to the clerk. Let me take a look," the girl said. After a moment, she came back. "Movie system is on. Don't know what the problem is." "That's weird," Hansel said. "Unless you're trying to get something that's child protected. Hold on." She left the line and returned. "Yeah, your room is child protected. Are you trying to get an adult film, sir?" He froze. "It says here this block of rooms is child protected. Are you with a school group?" "No, I was just trying to get something else. Forget it. I was really just calling for a wake-up call. Can you put me down for 6:30? "You're already set for a wake-up call at 6 a.m., sir." "Well, make it 6:30. "Okay, fine."
Oh, you want to take the mic? Yeah, just.
Hello.
So, was there any portion of that was taken from your own life?
Not at all. Complete fabrication. Complete fabrication.
Never been in a Marriott?
Never. Next. Sorry. It's all right. I didn't mean it.
Oh yeah, Mulligan's Travels. So this White Men's Problems was the final 9 of the 9 stories. What was the first one?
The first one was the first story in the collection, Summer Farmer. Which
is also a title that is shared with John Cheever.
Right. So, I wanted to get the question of influence off the table from the very jump, so there's no better way to do that than to steal somebody else's title. But so the Summer Farmer was the John Cheever story from 1952, which has nothing to do with my story, except in the next to last paragraph of the John Cheever story. Just that big red book of John Cheever's short stories is an amazing thing. But in that story, you just read it. The next to last paragraph of the story is 140-word sentence, just one sentence.
Right.
And I just thought, wow, could I ever write a sentence like that? And this is part of the just sort of sitting down, facing the screen, like scratching and scrambling for anything. And so, so I just said, could I ever write a sentence like that? And I studied the sentence and he says, there's a phrase and a colon and then a series of statements with semicolon, and how he did it. And so I wrote a sentence like that and then imagined 2 characters, and I made that sentence the centerpiece of the story. Mm-hmm. And I won't bore you any much, but that sort of gave me the structure, and for that, then with that, and it was significant because it was the first one, and it was significant for me to have the structure and not have to worry about. It's hard to just sort of imagine a beginning, a middle, and end. Sure. When you sit down, So knowing that I had a destination in the story was real helpful for the first one, and gave me confidence.
And so you put together this collection, and that is what we alluded to, that this literary agent, when you were first shopping, it said oh, it's not for me because it's just White Men's Problems. Is this the collection that they are looking at? You give them these 9 stories, and you're like, I would like to make this a book.
No, I think I said a couple stories.
Yeah.
And that was hardly the only rejection I received. I wrote 4 stories, and then I wrote a 5th story, and that kind of kept going. And the short story, they're obviously different forms, and I think those, so many of us read for a lifetime. I think it becomes second nature to kind of hear in the back of your head what is a short story and what is a novel. You kind of know inherently, what the scope and sense of a short story is versus what the arc and sort of luxuriousness of a novel is. And so I wrote 4 short. To me, short stories are more about a slice of life, people muddling through life, a decision, an event. I think Chekhov said famously that a short story is something observed out of the corner of your eye, that kind of thing. Whereas a novel is so anyway, the 5th one I got to kept going and going, and I realized, and that was kind of coming from my youth a lot. So I wrote that out as a novel, and tried to push that uphill for a couple years, and then a couple good friends and smart people suggested that I go back to the story form while I was trying to push the novel uphill, and then I ended up with 12 or 13 stories. Submitted them as you do. I tried not to. I've always sort of kept my ambitions to write fiction very separate from my professional life.
Well, I was going to ask if you have all these famous clients. If there was ever a moment that you're like, just put me in touch with someone or whatever, make it happen for me. Yeah. I know it doesn't even happen like that. Well, it is the book world.
Yeah, exactly.
Impossible.
It's incredibly hard, you know. And I also wanted to, it gets a little internal, but I've been incredibly fortunate to be around a large number of very talented people, and film and television, narrative film and television art form. And I've gotten to do cool stuff outside of the mantle of being a lawyer. I got to produce a documentary. I was a producer on a couple of movies. We've done
a pretty great musical.
Yeah, we put together Book of Mormon, and I got involved as a producer on that, and so I've been able to do non-lawyer kind of stuff all along, but I wanted to hold sort of fiction over here as something that all those art forms require tremendous collaboration, and I've always been in a support role and in a sort of putting together role, but they all require someone else's consent. They all require financing. They all require collaboration. And to me, the appeal of writing fiction one day was that it would all be on me,
right?
And I could do it, and that sort of tied in with not wanting to call in favors too much, and sort of do it on my own as much as possible. And I mean, whatever, I tried little things here and there, but it was more, I don't know, it was a very sort of personal thing. And
well, I mean, I made the joke about the memoir thing, but I'm sure some agents would be like, God, if you have, these people as your clients, can you just write some sort of tell-all memoir about your crazy clients? And I'm sure there's crazy stuff that happened in entertainment law. Right? Did anyone say anything?
Yeah, I'm waiting for the right price to do that. No, I admire people who write memoirs. I think, I always think go back and write 2 pages about something that happened to you 15 years ago and see if it really comes out that accurate or distinct, right?
There's no fact checker for your own life.
You know that,
which
right?
is a great thing.
So I really admire, but I didn't. I maybe one day, but I was obsessed with writing fiction, and that's what I wanted to do from a very young age. And
but this book did get published. This is the real thing, and it was born out of a book party, which sounds like in reverse, but I love that that's the path.
Yeah, well, I self-published it. I self-published it through I bit the bullet and did the self-publishing thing through CreateSpace and Amazon. I didn't even really submit the short story collection to anyone other than a couple of the stories to agents. And I decided that I just really wanted to see this book. I just wanted to see it, almost like an arts and crafts project. So I pursued that whole thing and went through, and decided to sort of get over myself and get over the stigma of self-publishing and go for it. And then once it was done, and there's a lot of work involved in it, it was a very interesting process. And interior design and edit and do copy and do a cover, and don't like anybody's covers. And then a friend of mine, a great artist, I wanted my bulldog on there, and for reasons become obvious if you read the book. And so that was fun. It was like making something, like making the documentary or making the music. It was like making something, and I got to make it. So that was really cool. But then there's a moment where it goes up on Amazon, and then you're sort of done, and then you think, is there anything else?
Right. What do I do with this?
Right. And so then you realize how hard people have to push their books, and how much self-marketing has, and the horrible, deathless humiliation of self-promotion, and so in that regard, with classic self-promotion, I threw a couple parties.
Yeah.
Morgan Entrican from Grove came to one of the parties and called me a couple days later and said, you know, I mean, he said, I like your friend that invited me to the party, but the stories are good. You know, I don't really care about that. The stories are good, and come on in, let's have lunch.
You know, and I had no idea. I not knowing a lot about the self-publishing industry, I didn't know that you could self-publish and then publish not self. After that, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's a wide open world. I think the rules are being written every day, and I think there's a lot of I have had a lot of help from a lot of creative people who are working and figuring all that stuff out and the seams of all that stuff out. This is being published in trade paperback. There's no hard. I mean, I did a hardcover on the self-published thing, but there's different. And then we did a deal to do a novel after it. But
yeah, you have a 2-book deal. Yeah. So who negotiated that contract?
It was not a long negotiation.
Did you take on your own negotiation?
Yeah, I did it. I said, yeah, here's a negotiation. Do you want this? Yes.
Yes, very good.
That was the negotiation.
And that it will be the novel?
Yes, and then I'm working on a novel for Grove. So
different from the one that you had before? Really?
Yeah.
All right. So there's plenty of projects. So, and now you alluded to the fact that yes, this is your bulldog, and this dog makes an appearance in one of the stories. As a dog owner, I will say that I had to sort of read it very quickly and get to how it worked out because I was very scared. But if you're a dog owner, you'll be fine. And is this dog name, is this Henry?
It's Henry.
This is Henry.
This is Henry.
Same name in the book. There are some characters taken right from your life.
He's right in the, it's the middle story. He's in the middle of the middle story. Just like a middle-aged white man. You don't know whether, he's, you don't know whether he's looking there, if he's standing there sweetly or he's about to get run over.
So, what do you like what's your favorite thing about being a lawyer in entertainment law?
Well, I like that I get to protect and advocate for really talented people. And I probably wouldn't do that if I didn't get to do this. So I got very lucky very young and met some spectacularly talented artists. And then I have very good friends who we grouped together. We were pretty insurgent. The law firm business in Los Angeles was sort of locked up by some elder, growing older, monopolistic lawyers and small firms, and we went after them, and we got together with clients our age, and we built a firm we're very proud of, and we've kicked butt, and it sounds a little militaristic, but it's that part has been really, there's a advocacy part, and there's a because my belief is that the studios are stealing our money. That's my firm belief. So, to sort of get behind that and
I like your style.
Believe that and believe in and help advocate for and represent and deal with the problems of and try to protect really special, incredibly gifted people is a really great, cool, only way I could practice law.
I was thinking too that the way, because I was like, oh, you work so much with television film, there's many of the stories to me, with the dialogue was written, it sounds, I thought starting out, one of the stories of two lawyers really read like a play. I envisioned a lot of the things, I thought they were very visual. Did you write this at any of these stories with the mind's eye of it having a life on a different stage or on
No, actually quite screen? The contrary. Like I don't even really, I mean, I guess if somebody wants to do that, I'd do it, but I really don't ever, wasn't thinking. I really do think of fiction as, it's almost snobby, but I think of it as really, really, really important, and I mean, I do have a little bit of a thing about this kind of fiction about red-blooded American men, from the outside a little bit, and not, I do have a little bit of a feeling of that going away, whether it's true or not. It might be controversial. I don't think the numbers bear out the fact that white men are underrepresented or anything like that. It's just more of a stylistic point, and some of my heroes and some of the people I'm talking about have passed away, and I have a little sense of that some of that, that male writing is evolving maybe a little bit more neurotic kind of internal dialogue kind of stuff, and I like writing about guys who would never think they were victimized, and who just like John Collier, the old man who's caring for his wife. That guy would never think about how much he's being victimized and how much his rights as a man are being
right, these sort of unique internal struggles that are
guys, guys who like women who like guys, and
trust me, that is rare. I wrote a book and people were like, "Wow, you like men," and they were like, "That was big front page news." Because it is different.
I hear you, and it's and I guess what the other thing that's interesting to me, just to come back around to the tip about teleplays and screenplays and stuff like that, is I actually think if the male reader audience is migrating away, which it seems like everybody in publishing tells me, and sort of seems anecdotally true among my friends and stuff, I do wonder sometimes if that audience is migrating to narrative television and cable television in particular. So you think about The Sopranos or Breaking Bad or even Walking Dead or Mad Men. Those are my guys. Like those. So I think it's really important to write fiction about those characters and let the events and dialogue and stuff tell it, rather than sort of, I just see a lot of stuff that's saying it, and everybody, and writers are just sort of saying everything that's in the guy's mind and every neurotic,
like overdoing it.
Yeah. And that's me. That's just me. That's just my feeling. And that, you use whatever you use to fire yourself up to sit down and write, and that's sort of that's a little bit of my thing about literature.
I have one last question before we open up to a Q&A, which is your ultimate hope of what you would like a reader to get out of reading this collection. What are you hoping their final note in their head is after reading it, other than it was great? I
would say this, that hopefully there's, hopefully in the panoply of human expression, maybe there's a little place for, a sort of somewhat self-mocking book about the problems of regular white men all through the course of American life, and that there's this sort of bittersweet kind of thing about you have different ways of dealing with it. There's problems big and small, and we all have good days and bad days. We all have big problems and little problems, and that a lot of people are just doing their best, and that there's different ways of trying to deal with those problems. One is victimization, one is stoicism, which is a traditional white male sort of way of dealing with it, as is victimization. Stoicism, humor, the sort of Donald Bartholomew thing about all you can do is go home and have your 9 drinks and forget about it, the humor. And then the final one I would say is a spiritual solution, and I think if a reader kind of came away with with a notion of that contemplation of these issues, that would make me feel good.
I like it a lot. How about a hand for Kevin?
All right, we have a mic to pass around for questions if anyone has anything to ask. See one in the back.
Thanks.
There you go.
Hi, I know your childhood was very different from the life you live now, but you're writing about guys and notions of maleness. And to what extent do you see the same things going from there into the more rarefied world in which you find yourself now?
Thank you for that question. I only have, all I can draw from is my life, and I've been very fortunate, and I've had a lot of help. I think it's trite to say that the wealthy have problems and everybody has problems. I think it's pretty trite. My problems today are a hell of a lot better than the problems I had when I was living in a room with my 3 brothers. But having said that, I do enjoy being able to, in my imagination, travel all across the different spots, and it's been particularly rewarding and emotional to write about childhood stuff, and the stuff that I pulled out from there has been really, I don't even know if I'm answering your question, but that's been really meaningful to be able to access that stuff. And I just think that the success that I've had in my life, to the extent I've been successful and fortunate, I'm very grateful that that's allowed me artistically to access that stuff.
Hi, you mentioned a lot of your influences. I noticed they were all male writers. Do you have any favorite female writers, and if so, whom?
I have tons. I have tons. You know, I apologize, and I don't apologize for my, you know, we all have our biases and our favorites, you know, but I have very many female influences. I think Flannery O'Connor was the baddest badass that there ever was. You know, I love Lori Moore. You know, I thought, Edna St. Vincent Millay is one of my favorite poets. It's kind of a crazy thing. I love, Hilary Mantel. Those are the best books, you know, in the last couple of years for me. Those Hilary Mantel books are phenomenal.
Carolyn Keene. She wrote Nancy Drew.
I was more of a Hardy Boys guy.
I figured you were.
I would find a clue. South Park fans. Yes, sir.
A couple more questions.
Somebody was going to write your memoir. What you wanted to be?
You. I mean, I don't know. No idea. I don't know. Let me. I'll try to answer that in a second.
If John Updike was alive?
You'd be pretty lucky to have him write anything about you, right, for sure. Right? For sure. Although he'd give it to you between the eyes. That's for sure. That's for sure. There's a lot of great writers of. We live in a real golden age of long form nonfiction. That's for sure. That's for sure.
Hey, so what struck me at this is we have this psychological pervasive tendency of adjusting our reference point when we think of our problems and our situation and our condition in life. And it was cool that you see all these different people at different stages, which could appear to people outside of their world to sort of have it made or not have it made. And this is a window into problems still harboring on people's lives, regardless of where they are. Maybe it's the pain of human condition, maybe it's what we need to thrive, and so on. But everyone sort of has problems, even though you may think they shouldn't have. And collecting these different but similar problems, what kind of thoughts do you have towards solutions, towards, you know, maybe changing the frame of reference, maybe sort of showing some of the stories, some of the leads in some of the short stories, the other leads in the other short stories for reference? Or is there any sort of cross-pollination or any thought towards how to get out of these ruts that it seems that we inevitably end up in?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that. I mean, of course, I think I'm trying to get at the fact that a lot of these problems are universal, you know, and hopefully, you know, demonstrating the problem of one rich white guy could transport into a universal problem. I'm certainly after some of that, for sure. I'd love to be able to say that, but I guess I'll repeat myself a little bit after thinking about problems big and small, the interplay of problems big and small, good days, bad days. On good days we treat big problems well. On bad days we treat little problems like they're massive, right? It's a big, complicated, crazy ass world, you know. And what I've tried to demonstrate in the book is there are sort of I roughly say there's sort of 4 ways to go, especially for contemporary white men, right? There's victimization, which I hate. There's stoicism, which there's a lot negative to. There's humor, which I really like, you know, because you kind of can't, you know, if I could be one thing, it would be funny, you know. And then the final thing, which kind of surprised me, because I'm not necessarily, don't live my life up to now necessarily this way. The final one was a sort of spiritual solution and remembering some of the stuff from my Catholic upbringing and just spiritual stuff in general. And I see those as the four methods of dealing with it. And hopefully the stories in the books can transport you there. yeah.
You mentioned that you always had a passion for writing, even when you were younger, though despite that, you still decided to go to college to become a lawyer and pursued that career path. Was there some event or catalyst that, what caused you to decide, you know what, I want to write, I'm going to pursue my passion, my dream, and how did you just stick with that despite all those constant obstacles and get to where you are right now?
Well, I just, honestly, I just felt like I was not doing the thing I was meant to do, and not the thing I really wanted to do, and that noise got so loud that I decided to do it. And I was incredibly fortunate, that I made some dough and had good partners and good, had this sort of time to go after it, but I have a healthy ego. I thought I could do it, and I've lived in Los Angeles. I lived in a time, it's whatever. We live in America. We are very fortunate. We can do things, and I lived in a time, the evidence in front of me from my life is that I could do it. I live in Los Angeles in a period of time is really ripe with entrepreneurialism and creativity and stuff like that. And I was able to do a documentary. I was able to start a law firm. I was able to, help my, people create incredible forms of art. So I was buoyed by that, and and I think writing is a lot about confidence, man. And you fight it I think you fight it every day, and tomorrow might have none of it. But the answer to your question is, I think I just finally said, I turned 50, and I just said, or I was about to turn 50. I just said, man, if I don't do this, I'm not going to be happy with myself.
All right, I think we have time for one more question. Anyone? Okay, great. On behalf of the Strand, thank you to Kevin and Ophira for being here. Feel free to stick around, get your book signed. We have some pens back here. More of both authors' books are available at the back of the room for purchase. And thank you all for coming out. Thanks.